They're gonna kill the love of my life.
David!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. You have reached a Venus Unplugged, your virtual heartbreak hotel. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. And what we're doing here the next couple of weeks, we're exploring the work of Toni Wolff, who was a collaborator and a first-generation Jungian, and she wrote The Structure of the Feminine, and we're dealing with the mother type, the Hatara, the Amazon, and now the MEDIAL. And the MEDIAL woman, what does this have to do with love? Everything. Because how we are orientated in life, okay, is also how we're going to love. How we're going to give love, how we're going to receive love. What is it about? So the more we know about these possibilities, okay, what's really motivating us or inspiring us or terrifying us, which is very often is the case in love, a lot of terror in love, because love is actually beyond the ego, and we keep on trying to get it ego-orientated, and it's a supreme force. Okay, so the MEDIAL woman, she's the one, she kind of lives between the worlds. Her loving is not necessarily personal, meaning that she doesn't need the male or the woman or the other, okay, in a personal relation. Her sense of self comes from the other, as in the divine, as in the gods or the goddesses, okay? That's where she gets her strength. That's where she gets her sense of love. That's where she's identified. And, of course, early on in her life, this is not made very clear. She's just a kind of little weird kid, okay, with strange little abilities. And very often needs to be off alone and maybe in the forest or just in her closet or, just having to get away from people because just the collective can be so overwhelming. She may have a lot of sensitivities, and at first those are not understood. I know with myself, because my mother didn't think it was so adorable, certain days I'd be so sensitive to a certain color, I simply couldn't wear it. It was like, please just don't make me wear that color. I'll die, all right? And, I'm the youngest of 7, and those kind of requests are a little nerve-wracking. But usually she would listen, okay? Or I would go get something and put it on, and then I was cool, okay? So these children, when as a child, when you're orientated, or you may be very, you want to be a nun or you want to go into religious, because usually the MEDIAL woman is either religious, where she's a mystic, and she'll want to work with God in an official capacity, meaning religion. Okay, or she wants to go the other way, where she wants to be a priestess and run around the woods and work with fairy and have mystical experiences. All right. Now, we all have a piece of this, and there are times in our life when the MEDIAL will kick through, where all the logic in the world is going nowhere, and suddenly we get an insight, and you're shocked. Why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Why am I believe this? Essentially, the MEDIAL woman knows that she knows, but she doesn't know how she knows. It's another kind of voice. It's another possibility. It's another way of seeing things. For myself, as a young MEDIAL woman, I just thought I was nuts. I didn't even know there was such a word. Because in alchemy, your individuation, your wholeness, your transformation, your mud hell is what you're going to be in. And I love when they call it individuation, or, initiation, you're going to hell. You are in the swamplands, okay? And but somehow you kind of work your way out. So early, as a young woman, one of my first initiations was anorexia. And, of course, that's definitely wanting to be with spirit. Okay, it's a huge, you don't even realize it's a death wish. You want to be in spirit. And I can remember that feeling. It's like, well, if I could just get light enough, I could then just stay in that kind of rarefied air. Of course, you're nuts to the rest of the world. But you'll see in many of the lives of saints, they were anorexic, or they would go through purging and starving, and then, of course, you get visions. Now, of course, this was completely unconscious on my part, so I just spent a lot of time in therapy trying to figure stuff out. But I realized afterwards that was one of my first initiations into this life as a MEDIAL woman, and that as much as you in earlier life want to, I would always wonder, it's like, why don't I want the things that other people want? I just didn't. Or why can I see something that nobody else knows? And, of course, that makes you upset. And it's also very lonely because you're seeing things and you're experiencing things, and, of course, you want to communicate them to the right people. That's the huge difference. One of my favorite stories is the madman and the mystic, and the mystic goes to visit the madman in the asylum, and the madman says, I don't get it. Like, you're like 10 times nuttier and crazier than I am. How come you're not in an institution? And the mystic said, because I knew who to speak to of such things. You moron, you told everybody. So there's that kind of quality where it's secretive in the sense, but it's secret as in sacred. You know, that's not so cool to be mentioning this right now. This could be very, very disruptive. Okay. Or it's like, Aunt Mary's going to be at Christmas, and you think, no, she's not. Aunt Mary's going to be like in heaven. Okay. But that's the MEDIAL. That's that energy. So she does not, like the mother type wants the mother, everybody, and makes the man the boy, the child. Okay, it's infantile. So the Hatara wants to be the inspiration and is the inspiration for the male. So those are personal kind of archetypes. But the Amazon, she's the one that wants to bring the culture forward, okay? And her identity does not lie in her relationships, although she wants them. And the MEDIAL, it's also another impersonal. Her identity does not revolve around a relationship, an earthly relationship. Her relationship is with invisible forces and gods and goddesses and divas and all those kind of fun things that we're much more accustomed to right now. So one of the major mythos, once again, we work with this because the unconscious is informing our external life. The collective unconscious is humongous. Well, whoever is the most conscious in the world is only like 1% compared to the collective unconscious. That's the pool. That's the information. That's what's connected to the whole universal forces. So that's a lot of energy and a lot of things to interpret. And since it's inhuman, that is part of what the MEDIAL woman does. She's hooked into the collective unconscious. So a lot of times, nobody knows what she's talking about, not even herself. And it takes time and study. I know one of my early experiences, and I still wasn't sure. I had gone to my first, I guess it was 20, I had gone to my first I had been in Freudian, and then somebody told me about astrology. It was astrology, what's that? Went to an astrologer, of course found out more about myself in an hour and a half than what was happening in the teenage years of therapy. And then somebody told me about this woman, Dion Fortune. I thought, oh, okay, that's nice. And a book called Psychic Self-Defense. So we're in the 80s now, and I'm reading this book, and I'm reading it. I'm terrified. My stomach is in a knot. And part of my terror is as I'm reading this, and it seems so out there, okay, there's this other dreadful realization that, one day I'm going to know exactly what this is about. And I was terrified, but I couldn't stop. So there's always these hints. There's these suggestions. Something comes into our life, and we know it's going to be part of us. Usually, this isn't something you go looking for. It's something that seizes you, or you begin to realize, wow, okay, I got to deal with this. So this is the place that this type plays in our society, and thank goodness there's much more consciousness around it than there ever was. So this is great. One of the mythical archetypes is goddesses is Persephone. Very often a Persephone type of woman will be a MEDIAL woman. Okay, now Persephone, for brush up on your Greek mythology, Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, and she was abducted at the age of 7. Now, for those of you that are in astrology, 7, we always perk our ears up because 7 is always any combination of 7. We know Saturn is around, karma, teaching. And she's abducted by her uncle, Pluto, and she's abducted into the underworld. Her mother finds out that she's missing and stops all growth on the earth, and cannot understand, and grieves and suffers. And this is what created the Eleusinian mysteries, which are the great feminine mysteries of ancient Greece. Okay, now, on a psychological level, Demeter and Persephone are one and the same. Demeter is the mother, okay, and Persephone is the virginal daughter, the uninitiated. Now, when she goes into the underworld, a whole mystery goes on in the underworld, and she's tricked into, because if you're in the underworld, you're not supposed to eat anything, because then you're part of it, okay? And Pluto shoves now I completely forgot it. It's that red apple. Okay, I'll get it to you next week. Into her mouth. Okay, pomegranate. Yay, pomegranate, I remembered it. See, I'm in that MEDIAL thing. That's what happens. I get it, I'm floating, I'm in and out. And she takes in 7 seeds, so therefore she has to return to the underworld. Now, some people say that this is mythology about the seasons, 6 months above and 6 months below. But Persephone, she goes down a virgin, and she comes up queen of the underworld. That's pretty intense. So a Persephone type, or who has that influence, very often they are just natural healers. Well, again, they need to spend time alone, all right? See, the character of Persephone woman it's not easy to grasp. Many Persephone women are themselves highly secretive and often reclusive, which is a good thing. They need to hold that energy until it works on them. All right. And the psychic strain of being around people and the bustle of, life and Bloomingdale's and all that kind of stuff, it's too much for them. I certainly can fall into that. I know the days that I can go out and the days that I can't. It's just too much. And it's not like being oversensitive. It's the energy is devouring something. It will throw me off. Okay, so I'm careful in my planning. I mean, there's always room for certainly always things that are unexpected, but in general, you need to know what you can do and what you can't do, okay? And so sometimes you just have to retreat. And a lot of times with the MEDIAL women, they live on the kind of the edge of existence. They don't really, it's not an Amazon. You're not going to go into the workplace and change the nature of a company or a country or any of those things. You're kind of like a Pythia, right? And so the psychic world, the collective unconscious, esoteric writings, alternative forms of healing. Those are all things that she's interested in. Those are all things that make her feel better, okay, and make her feel. Because initially it's a search for the language that's making sense out of the no sense. You're just feeling all these things. And without a language, whether it's the esoteric, whether it's astrology, whether it's tarot, these are symbolic languages. Very often, I mean, Jung, one of his aunts was a medium, and his mother certainly was clairvoyant, and not to mention Jung himself. So this underworld energy is what we can't see. So the Persephone type, all right, she is the MEDIAL woman. And sometimes she has difficulty and with an ego. You have to have a strong ego to be able to surrender to these forces. Otherwise, they'll overwhelm you. I certainly know that in my own life, how many years it took me to develop a sense of self, because you're constantly being called forth. You know, it's as if, you know, the divine is a local call. It's not long distance. It's just always present. And if you don't have a strong ego, it all becomes like scrambled eggs. What is, what isn't, okay? Or you just sound like a nut job, okay? As opposed to oracular or poetry. Art is another way that the MEDIAL woman can express herself and the visions that she's being given and the connection she has to the collective unconscious. Now, the collective unconscious is that ocean, that overwhelming ocean of feeling and emotions and images and things not yet formulated. In that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, about mystics and physicists, you know, they make it very clear that we can't see something or if we don't have the symbol for it. You can see a sign that the wind is moving a certain way, and when you start focusing with a diffused focus, so it's not a sharp, eagle-eyed focus, it's more like, gee, I wonder what that is, and you don't approach a problem with a false ego of how am I going to do this, or I have to overcome this. It's perhaps, or it could be. It's a softer way, a more poetic way. You allow things to flow in and out. It's not the ego certainty of it absolutely is this way. Well, could be, it couldn't be. Okay, we need to leave room for interpretation. So my own life, my first stage of development was in 7 years in the esoteric, and then another 20 with the Jungian work, to learn the language of dreams and the language of psyche. So this is all very important. So read your mythologies and write down your dreams, even if you don't understand them. That is the MEDIAL. We honor that. That's a modern-day ritual to connect to psyche. And one day, that dream will get revealed. It always does. Right? So the MEDIAL woman is, especially when she's in love or in a state that she loves in a different way. It's not, I know my own life, and especially when I was young, I didn't understand it. Whatever paramour of the moment was, would be like, you don't act like you really need me. And it was always struck me as odd. Why would I need? I love. Isn't that enough? Then need? Why would I need? And part of it was because of my self-containment. You won't be my God. I'm having enough of a trouble communicating with the divine. I'm not going to make you my God. And if a man doesn't have a strong ego and a sense of self, he wants to be the God. You know, this is all completely unconscious. They don't know that they're doing this. And then you start realizing, like, oh, that's true. Don't need a man that way. And if a man needs to be needed as a god or projected as a god, never going to work. Two completely different ways of relating and loving. Just won't happen. Right? So this Persephone type that she's abducted, so very often when women have a MEDIAL, something happened at the age of 7. It can be a depression, someone died, it could be, God forbid, a molestation, okay, or some type of, trauma, and they can go into themselves, okay, or they just, they have to be away from the other kids. They're just different. Okay. Today we're a little more open, and we also see these amazing indigo kids coming in and crystal kids. So they're full throttle MEDIAL. They know that, and it's society's job to learn to communicate with them because they know what they're seeing. They got the truth. And a lot of times they don't have anything to say, so it's with symbolism. So that the Persephone, very often you'll find that that's part. Now, I don't know if many people are aware of the book The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. Morgan Le Fay, MEDIAL, okay, from the Arthurian legends. Now, The Mists of Avalon is this fabulous book, and it talks about the life and the world of the priestesses and the goddesses, but from the goddesses' point of view, not the patriarchal Christian point of view of the Arthurian legends which were coming in. So it's quite amazing. And Morgan Le Fay is young, and you start to see what her training was as a priestess and her annoying resistance to what her destiny was. And we all have that. I find it annoying because of my own annoying resistance. And I think of the years that it was just too freaky-deaky. Enormous resistance. And then I had 2 near-death experiences, and that kind of went like, oh, okay, I'm on board. Thank you very much. So that's a book. Or the books of Dion Fortune, Psychic Self-Defense, the original book on psychic self-defense. She was an occultist at the turn of last century. Okay, she was the first. She wrote, it's not great writing, but it's a wonderful story, Moon Magic, Sea Priestess. And she also had an occult school. And her real name was Violet Firth. That's some name, isn't it? But she changed it to her magical name was Dion Fortune. And she was the first of the feminine to go to Chalice Well and to raise the goddess. And those 2 books are about the goddess. I think she wrote those in the 20s or the 30s or something. So that was around a long time, and she was very, very influential. And all her books, really, really good information about the occult, particularly her psychic self-defense. So these and the Mists of Avalon, once again, Chalice Well. Actually, after I read The Mists of Avalon, I went to all the sacred places in England that the priestesses went to, and I had it in my head that Avalon was just mythic. It was in the invisible. It wasn't real. Only through a whole series of kind of occult interventions and sacred coincidences that I actually wound up in at Chalice Well, and it was living and it was real. And of course, being the typical Gemini, I didn't realize it until I left, and then it was like, oh my God, I actually was in Chalice Well in Glastonbury, England. And then for many years after that, twice a year at the high holy days of May Day and Halloween, I would go to Chalice Well and participate in the ceremonies that were there. So that's the way. And another fabulous book, actually this was written in 1966, so it's an early forerunner of all the information that we know about mystics and physicists, and it's The Medium, the Mystic, and the Physicist by Lawrence Leshon, and Leshan. And that book is an attempt to begin to understand what the medium and the mystic and the physicist, how perception. What is that about? So for you MEDIAL women out there, which there are many, and as I said, sometimes it will go through phases. You've done the mothering and you've done being the inspiration for the great man, and suddenly the world of the unconscious opens up, or dreams, or mythology, and you find yourself thirsting to be filled, but most of all, to be filled with the divine. And that's really an authentic need. And when that happens, you've been called. You're not doing the calling. You've been called. And then we pay attention to that. We go into service to that, which is its own journey in and of itself. But one of the myths of the Delphic Oracle, the myths of Delphi, that's when they would stand up on that tripod. And for those that have been listening, in the mythology of Amor and Psyche, her father, Psyche's father, the king, goes to the Delphi Oracle, and that's when she's told that she's going to marry the vilest of men, and that begins the journey of Amor and Psyche. So at the Delphi Oracle, these priestesses were chosen. Then they'd go into the Delphi. Sometimes they were married, sometimes they weren't, okay? But what I found so interesting about the Delphi, or the Pythias, okay, that's what they're called, is how people needed to prepare to meet the oracle. You just didn't, call for an appointment, okay? You had to purify, and you were screened, okay? So people that would go to, so it was also a society that respected and honored the MEDIAL woman. So it didn't matter if she was blabbering, because the priest would, she'd be in some altered state, and then the priest would do the interpretation. But for people who were going to the Delphi Oracle, okay, first they had to make the journey. And this is also true emotionally. We have to make that journey. We know we're on a journey. Very often, we think we're going one place and we wind up going someplace else. Or certainly falling in love. That's a journey and a half to the Pythias, to say the least. All right, so they were motivated by some need to undertake the long and sometimes arduous journey to Delphi in order to consult the oracle. So many times, people will come to me and say, I'd never imagine myself coming to somebody like you. And it's like, and I know they've been through hell and back. And the last person they want to hear from is me or the MEDIAL woman, and yet they must. So it's interesting. It's a surrender of sorts. Their ego's not giving them the answers. Something else pushes them, or, they find out, about somebody, and that's usually how it happens. You usually don't find it in the yellow pages. Somebody tells them, and they just go I'm devastated, or I don't have any answers. That's a good start. We know in that case it's tragic, it's suffering, but it's also loss of ego, so they can really change. That's part of what I want to create here is this. The way of the heartbreak, what is it about? Right? And then they would have to prepare. They'd be interviewed for the presentation to the oracle by the priests, and in genuine cases were sorted, as opposed to people who just, wanted, the lotto numbers. And they went through these, and the participants went through rituals themselves of purification and framing the questions, and the presentations of gifts to the oracle, and the procession on the sacred way. And a lot of the laurel leaves were used, and they were burned. They were sacred to Apollo. And a lot of times it happens, but somebody will call for an appointment, and it's like, and then they'll ask me, I love this one, and then they'll ask me, well, what exactly do you know? It's like, what exactly do I know? What exactly do you understand? I mean, that's always such a hard thing, because it's not as the MEDIAL, it's not you. It is the divinity that's working through you. So I can't believe it. I have to leave. The English lady just said I've got 30 seconds left. So go on the website, LlorraineNeithardt.com, or download the episodes, okay? So then they would visit the oracle, okay? And the oracle would then be... sometimes it was, like I said, it was just blabbering, but the priest knew what they were talking about. And then yet they had to return home after the advice, and then that would help them shape their future action. and that they were, whatever they were told, the priest would help them discern that. So I guess the priest would kind of be like the therapist. The oracle would be the waking dream or the insight or the psychic reading. And I'm going to get cut off. Okay, next week we got more. We got lots more. Lots more. So till next week, happy trails. So be your own oracle. Write down your dreams. Bye.
You're gonna kill the love of my life. If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide. Now playing.